The wife was having an affair with someone else and was going to tell her husband soon, but that's not where the husband showed up and saw it. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. You can learn a lot about someone by playing tennis with them. I've found that generally, guys who are gentlemen on the tennis court are also gentlemen in their lives off the court. Conversely, I watched a guy display some of the worst integrity I've ever seen while playing with his best friend. Later, I was not surprised when this guy abandoned his family and ran off with another man's wife. And then there's Frank Calhoun. Frank is a big guy. In fact, he played football at Georgia Tech until he blew out his knee. After an orthopedic surgeon repaired it, Frank switched to tennis, where he played like a football player, making powerful serves and shooting from the baseline. But I could beat him. I like to go up to the net and put pressure on him to hit me. Typically, he would hit it too high, and the ball would bounce into the side rail. Let's just say that I provoked him. Let's say I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he hit. As a result, Frank always wanted to play with me. He just hated losing to the little guy. Actually, I'm not small. In fact, I'm 182 centimeters tall but quite thin and wiry, which makes me small compared to Frank, who is 7.5 centimeters taller and 34 kilograms heavier than me. It's no surprise that I don't really want to play with Frank, but it's hard to avoid him because we both live in the Eden Point area north of Atlanta. Since Atlanta is such a big tennis town, our section was built around a clubhouse with a pool and multiple tennis courts. With so many people playing on teams in the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association League, it's pretty hard to avoid someone like Frank. But the good news was that I also got to play with a lot of really good people, like my mixed doubles partner, Penny Pennington. I met Penny through my wife, Melanie. Melanie is a Pilates instructor, and many people who live in Eden Point take classes at her studio, including Penny. Unfortunately for me, Melanie doesn't like tennis. But when she heard that Penny was looking for a partner, she introduced me to her, and Penny and I have been playing together for about a year. The club we were playing at today was quite far away in Stone Mountain, so I suggested that Penny come with me to save gas. With traffic getting heavy on Saturday afternoons, we budgeted 45 minutes to get there. As she walked out the front door, I wondered again why Penny was still single. This was partly due to the fact that she had lost her husband in a car accident 3 years earlier. After a long period of mourning, one of the ways she dealt with her grief was to join Melanie's Pilates class. Another option was to return to tennis, which she had played in high school. The result of all this physical activity was a fit, slender, dark-haired woman in her early 30s. I expected a woman as beautiful as Penny to attract suitors like flies to honey, but she kept telling Melanie that she just hadn't found the right man for herself. "Hey Penny," I greeted her as she opened my car door. "Are you ready to beat them today?" She grinned at me. "I bet, Michael. I've been waiting for a rematch with them for a long time." As I was getting onto I-285, we were talking about our strategy for the match, but I was interrupted by my cell phone ringing. "Hello, Robert. Are you kidding me?" "No, everything is fine here." "Damn. Okay, we'll reschedule." Penny looked at me questioningly as I took the next exit and headed home. "It was our enemy," I told her. He said that it had just rained and it was impossible to play on the courts. Atlanta is known for localized downpours that can drench one area of the city while the sun is shining brightly just a few miles away. Penny was clearly disappointed. "Damn it, I really wanted to play today." "Look," I said, "why don't we go back to the club? We can practice, and maybe there will be someone there who wants to play." Arriving at the main entrance to Eden Point, I turned onto the road leading to my house. "I want to stop for a minute and pick up my check for this quarter's club dues," I said to Penny. "I'll be there in a minute." I parked at the curb and rushed to the front door. Last night, I wrote out a check and left it on my dresser so I knew where to find it. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard sounds coming from the master bedroom, sounds I shouldn't have heard. "Oh, please, do it again, yes, like that," I heard Melanie's voice. "What the hell?" I tiptoed along the corridor and looked in the door. Melanie lay without clothes on the bed, and above her was a man who was pleasuring her. She made a sound and gasped. I felt like I was in a car accident. I was stunned. I couldn't move, I couldn't think. Everything suddenly changed, and I couldn't understand what was happening. No, this can't be true, I thought, recognizing the figure of Frank Calhoun. He took her, and she began to encourage him with screams. I backed away from the door as if I had been punched. It was unbearable. My first instinct was to rush into the room and attack him, but what good is that? I asked myself in despair. She already cheated on me. Fighting him won't change that. Besides, even if I landed the first blow, he's much bigger than me and could still beat me to a pulp. But I couldn't bear to avoid it. As I stood there, I suddenly remembered that Penny was waiting in the car. Oh crap, I need to get her home first before I can come back here to face them, I thought. I found myself walking back down the hallway in a daze and out of the house. I felt like I might throw up at any second. I looked up and saw Penny looking at me through the car window. A moment later, I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. I don't know what I looked like, but apparently I didn't look too good. Are you okay, Michael? Penny asked worriedly, looking at me. I couldn't speak. I grabbed the steering wheel as tightly as I could, steering the car toward Penny's house. When I stopped, I parked the car and said, without looking at her, "Sorry, Penny, but I can't play with you today." "What happened, Michael?" "What happened?" she asked with growing concern. When I didn't answer, she reached over, turned off the ignition, then took out the keys and kept them. As she walked out into my door, I turned to her. "I have to go, Penny. Please give me back my keys." "No," she said firmly. "Not until you tell me what happened." When I didn't say anything, she opened the car door and pulled my hand. "You're not going anywhere until you come inside and tell me what's going on." Like a robot, I got out of the car and let her take me to her house. She disappeared for a second and returned with a glass of ice water. I automatically sipped it while she looked at me. When I put the glass down, she took my hand and squeezed it in hers. "Tell me, Michael. What happened?" There, suddenly, all my resistance disappeared, and I leaned back against her sofa. I tried to speak, but my throat suddenly tightened again, so I took another sip of water. "Melanie and Frank were there," I said in a tense tone. She looked at me blankly. "Come on," she said. "They were there together in our bedroom?" "They were," my voice trailed off. She gasped. "No, this can't be true. Melanie would never do that." The image of the two of them came back to me with full force, and I felt a tear run down my face. "I thought so too," I croaked as the pain in my throat intensified. "Could it be something else, Michael? Could you be mistaken?" she asked. I knew she was trying to help, but that didn't stop me from getting angry. When I looked inside, she was lying on her back and Frank was pleasuring her. When he left, he took her and she encouraged him with screams. "So you're telling me, Penny, that I'm wrong?" She flinched at my angry sarcasm. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I didn't doubt you. I just hoped there might be some other explanation." Even more pain shot through me. "And of all people, Frank Calhoun," I said angrily. "How could she let that big baboon get close to her?" "I think that explains why Frank started taking Pilates lessons from Melanie," Penny mused out loud. "Did he take lessons from her?" I shouted. She never told me about this. My anger was still seeping out of me. "Thank you very much for the warning," I said bitterly. Now Penny was hurting. "It's not fair, Michael. I had no idea anything was going on between the two of them." "Sorry, Penny," I said. "I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just feeling pretty raw right now." She squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Michael. I can only imagine how you feel." "I have to go," I told her. "I have to go back there and find out what's really going on." "You won't do anything rashly, will you, Michael?" "No, I just need answers." She squeezed my hand. "Please let me know what's going on, Michael, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help." I thanked her and returned to my car. As I walked back to my home, I was afraid of what was coming. I thought about all the questions I wanted to ask her and tried to predict her possible reactions. I expected tears, denials, and angry words. How should I answer them? And what about Frank? What if he's still there? I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my body. When I walked through the kitchen door, Melanie must have heard me because she came out to meet me. She was wearing a robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. "You're back early," she said cheerfully. "How was the match?" "Everything there is flooded with rain," I said in an abrupt voice. "Oh, I'm sorry you didn't get to play," she said. I bet Penny was disappointed. I just looked at her. I didn't want to have a meaningless conversation. "I got a call about the rain right after we left," I said quietly. She blinked, but her expression didn't change. "I came back into the house," I told her, my heartbeat quickening. "And I saw you and Frank." Of the many scenarios I had come up with, Melanie's reaction was the most unpredictable. "I'm sorry you had to see this," she said calmly. "Is that all you have to say?" I asked incredulously. "Are you cheating on me and your only regret is that I witnessed it? Aren't you even going to say that you regret having a night with him? How long has this been going on? Don't you have any explanation?" She crossed her arms and sighed. "Sit down, Michael," she said, pointing to the dining room table. "I prefer to stand," I said angrily. "As you wish," she said, and sat down on a chair. I stood there, stunned by her complete lack of reaction. "Look, Michael, we were going to tell you soon anyway, but I think this will just speed up the schedule a little. I'm leaving you. Frank and I love each other, and I'm going to move in with him. We will get married as soon as the divorce is final." I decided to sit down. I didn't want to risk falling before I could think of anything to say. She jumped up and said, "Wait here," and then disappeared back into our bedroom. A few moments later, she returned clutching a sheaf of papers. She handed them to me across the table. "It shouldn't be too bad for you," she said. "I don't even want any alimony from you. I took all the money out of our savings account, but it's only fair because I'm leaving you the house. This offer is a lot better than what you'll get if we go to court, but I'll take it if you sign the papers and let us all get on with our lives." I looked at the stack of papers. It was a petition for divorce. "Have you already been to a lawyer?" I asked, surprised. "What about our marriage? What happened to the last 10 years we spent together?" "I'm so sorry, Michael. It wasn't something I planned, it just happened," she said. "Just take it for granted, accept this," I shouted. "Agree with my loving wife having an intimate with that Frank Calhoun in our own bed? Agree that our marriage ended this way? Aren't you even going to say that you regret having an intimate with him? How long has this been going on? Don't you have any explanation?" She stood up. "I'm disappointed, Michael. I was hoping for a more mature reaction from you." She turned and went back to the bedroom. I sat at the table, looking at the divorce petition in front of me, trying to understand what was happening. If anyone had asked me that morning, I would have told them that I loved my wife and that we had a strong marriage. This afternoon, I found out that she is leaving me for another man. Just cognitive dissonance. In the silence, I heard the beep of a mobile phone and then fragments of conversation. "He saw us? About as you expected? That would be good." When she returned, she was fully dressed and carrying an overnight bag and a makeup kit. "Now that you've put the question bluntly, I'm not going to stay here overnight. Frank will come for me. We'll come back on Monday when you're at work and pick up the rest of my things." "So you're leaving like this?" "That's how it should be," she said. "Okay," I said bitterly. "What should I tell our friends?" She sighed. "Look, Michael, Frank and I didn't do anything wrong, and we're not going to hide like criminals. We're going to continue to have an active social life. In fact, we'll probably go to the reception at Eden Point tomorrow night. You won't have to explain anything to anyone because they'll find out anyway." At that moment, a beep sounded from outside. "Frank has arrived," she said. "I'm leaving." As she closed the door, she turned around and looked at me. "Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do this, the better it will be for all of us." After that, she left. I don't know how long I sat there. Emotions flew through me like the carriages of a passing train. One minute, I was seething with anger, and the next, I was remembering happy times and filled with sadness. I told myself that I treated her like a queen, then thought, what did I do to make her leave? I'm better off without her, I repeated until loneliness overwhelmed me. My cell phone ringing startled me, and I quickly answered subconsciously. I think I was hoping to hear Melanie's voice, but it was Penny. "How are you, Michael?" she asked. "Not very good," I replied. She left me. "I heard," she said. "Did you hear?" I was surprised. "Where? How?" "I'm very sorry, Michael," she said sadly. "Frank was bragging about it at the club." Oh crap, I thought. It has already begun. On Sunday, I called the captain of our men's team. There was no way I was going to make it. "Sorry, Joe," I told him. "You'll have to cut me from the lineup today. I have some personal issues that need to be sorted out." "Yes, I heard," he said sympathetically. "I'm sorry. Good luck, buddy." I thanked him, but I knew all I could expect was more failure. I spent the whole day without leaving the house. I think I was hiding, although it pained me to admit it. There were sports programs on TV, but I didn't pay attention. My thoughts kept returning to my marriage to Melanie. Where did it all go wrong? At what point did she stop loving me? I was sure she loved me when we got married right after college. We were together consistently throughout our senior year. I asked her to marry me during the Christmas holidays. She was a health and physical education major, and whenever my fraternity brothers saw her in gym clothes, it made me uncomfortable. She had that irresistible combination of smartness and intimacy that is impossible to resist. I gave up trying the minute I met her. We settled into family life easily. I got a great job in Atlanta, and she got a job teaching an aerobics class. After a few years, we had saved enough money for a down payment on a house and found exactly what we were looking for in a brand new development called Eden Point. I thought we were really happy here. At Eden Point, I received several promotions in my company, and Melanie decided to go into business on her own. By then, we had enough money to rent space for her studio in one of the small shopping centers in the area, and her business was doing very well. Our savings account grew, we made many friends and acquaintances, especially in Eden Point, and we even started talking about having children in a year or two. Our nightlife had calmed down a bit, but that didn't surprise me. I was busy with work, and learning Pates every day would tire anyone. Thinking back on this, I began to realize that things had really slowed down over the past 6 months, although I didn't notice it at the time. I also remembered that Melanie seemed a little distracted at times, as if she was in another world. But when we made love, it felt better than ever, and I thought Melanie felt the same. Obviously, I was wrong. I mentally kicked myself. How could I be so blind as to not realize that she was involved with someone else? How could I not understand that she fell out of love with me and fell in love with Frank Calhoun? The only thing I could figure out was that when you love and trust someone, you don't look for signs of betrayal and deceit, I thought sardonically. No, I thought, you'll just have to wait until they hit you on the head. On Monday, I went to work early so I could arrive before it started, around 9 o'clock. I called my lawyer's office to make an appointment. When the secretary asked about the purpose of the meeting, I didn't want to get into the subject of Melanie and me, so I told her that I needed to make some changes to my will. When she came back online, she told me I could come right after lunch. When I got to the law office, Jonathan met me in the lobby. He was our classmate back in our student days, and when Melanie and I decided to make wills, I went to him. After we sat down in his office, he looked at me with concern. "Is everything okay, Michael? I understand that you need to change your will. Are either you or Melanie sick?" "Thanks for your concern, Jonathan, but it's not that bad," I told him. I then handed him the papers that Melanie had given me on Saturday. As he read them, he clicked his tongue to himself. When he finished, he looked at me. "I'm really sorry to hear about this, Michael. Do you think there is a chance for reconciliation?" "I don't think so. She has already moved out of our house and moved in with her boyfriend. She said they plan to get married as soon as our divorce is final." He shook his head. "I never expected this. You two seemed like the perfect couple." Then his expression changed, and his voice took on a professional tone. "Given these circumstances, I advise you as your legal advisor to sign this agreement immediately." Just erase 10 years of marriage like that, I said bitterly. He shook his head patiently. In matters like these, Michael, you have to stop thinking with your heart and start thinking with your head. I think Melanie made you a very generous offer, much better than what you would have received if you decided to fight against it. Part of her motivation may be guilt, but I'm willing to bet the main reason is to give you an incentive to agree quickly so she can marry her new man. While it may seem like you're giving in to her now, the truth is, if your marriage ends, that's the best you can hope for. I knew he was right. Hell, after what she did, I still didn't want to stay married to her, and yet it felt like he and Frank had beaten me at a game I didn't even know I was playing. Jonathan's tone became sympathetic again. Listen, Michael. I know the lawyer that Melanie hired. If you sign, we can file this settlement agreement with the court very quickly. This will reinforce what she is offering. Well then, if she decides she made a mistake and wants to go back, and if you're ready to take her back, you'll have another 30 days to back out of the divorce. Can I borrow your pen? I asked, returning to the office. Office. I headed straight to the HR department. I needed to make a lot of changes to my health insurance, my retirement savings plan, and a lot of other spousal benefits. The clerk who helped me must have done this often because he was able to fill out all the forms I needed in a short time. As I was signing them, I looked at him and saw that he was looking at me. I guess now I won't need to make an announcement in the office, I thought ironically. On my way home that evening, I stopped at a nearby restaurant and picked up dinner. When I returned home, I discovered that Melanie had been there that afternoon and had packed everything she wanted. Of course, all of her makeup was gone, but I was surprised to find that some items of clothing remained. However, when I examined them more closely, I realized that they were items that she no longer wore. I think I can drag them to Goodwill, I thought grimly. Further investigation revealed that the bedroom was not the only place she had raided. Our good china was gone, along with most of the tableware we received as wedding gifts. Also taken from the kitchen I noticed were some utensils and our set of good carving knives. Several pieces of furniture were missing, and when I entered the living room, I saw that most of our CD and DVD collection was also missing. While looking through our things, I noticed that she had left our wedding album untouched. For some reason, this depressed me more than everything she took with her. It was as if she wanted to erase all memories of her life with me. I returned to the kitchen and hid the food I had bought in the refrigerator. After discovering her intrusion, I had no appetite left. I made a mental note to change the locks. Damn it, how can you go from a happy marriage to a lonely divorced man in 3 days? I asked myself. It all seems so damn unfair. I spent the next week in virtual isolation, coming to work early and leaving late every day. Otherwise, I would have been left alone in the house. The humiliation of having Frank Calhoun steal my wife was excruciating, and the fact that I could do nothing about it was almost unbearable. I admit that I had fantasies about attacks with a baseball bat or brass knuckles, and sometimes I dreamed of hitmen and bombs in cars. But then I returned to the real world. Am I really going to ruin my life just to get revenge on a skirt-chasing creep and a wife who can't keep her legs together? By Friday, I decided it was time to come out of the cocoon. I didn't do anything wrong, and I had no reason to hide. I called Penny. Hey, partner, do we have a tennis match scheduled for this weekend? I asked, trying to sound upbeat and positive. Oh, Michael, I'm so glad to hear from you, she said quickly. I thought about calling you many times, but I decided that maybe you'd prefer to be alone for a while. Thank you, Penny, I replied, softening my tone. It was a hard week. I continued to tell her everything that happened, then asked, what was going on at Eden Point that I had missed? She spoke evasively and vaguely for a few seconds before admitting that our situation had become the talk of the section. You'd think they wouldn't have anything better to discuss, I said sharply. Maybe, Penny admitted, but Frank and Melanie aren't making it easy. Since last Saturday, they'd been hanging out at the club every evening. Frank almost openly boasts that the better man won, and Melanie hangs on him like a lovesick schoolgirl. I could hear the anger in her voice. That's just disgusting, Michael. I immediately quit her Pilates class and told her I couldn't be her friend anymore. Her dedication made me feel a little better. What about the others, Penny? What are they saying? I asked. I think this is what you'd expect, Michael. There are some who are very unhappy with Frank and Melanie, and they try to avoid the lovers as much as possible. There's also a group that always hangs out with Frank. They all praise his skill, if you know what I mean. But for most people, it's just a sad, awkward situation, and they try to stay away from it as much as possible. Intellectually, I knew this would happen, but part of me wanted the community to tar and feather Frank and Melanie and run them out of town on a rail. But I was determined not to let disappointment hold me back. Anyway, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in hiding, I told Penny. We have a game scheduled for Saturday, and if you don't mind, I'm going to go out on the court with my partner. I'm glad, Michael, she told me warmly. You can count on me. I deliberately arrived at the tennis courts a little late so as not to get drawn into discussions I didn't want to have. This didn't help much. As I approached the tennis pavilion, I felt the eyes of my neighbors and teammates on me. I could understand their curiosity, but I still hated the feeling. Seeing me, the captain of our mixed doubles team ran up to me. Michael, I'm so sorry. The second team changed their lineup at the last second, and some matches have already started, so I can't change anything. If you don't want to play, I understand. What are you talking about, Mary? I asked. I don't understand. This is Frank, she said. You and Penny must play against Frank and his partner. Oh crap, I thought this was the last thing I wanted at that moment. Penny approached. When she realized what was happening, her face turned pale. She took me aside and whispered, "We don't have to do this, Michael. There's nothing wrong with that. They'll just record a defeat for us, and next week we'll play someone else." No, I said so loudly that Penny jumped. I'm not going to hide from this idiot for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to face him, and it could start right now. Penny looked at me worriedly, but I turned back to Mary. It's okay, I told her. Penny and I will play. It was a massacre. I was playing worse than ever, and my obvious emotions were affecting Penny as well. Frank, on the other hand, was truly all in the game, and his powerful, thundering ground strikes seared the net like shots from an RPG. To make matters worse, he constantly teased me throughout the match. "Come on, Michael, you can hit it harder," he shouted after I made a weak shot, which resulted in him scoring a point against us. Another time, he mocked, "Even your wife can hit harder." Oh wait, it's my fault you don't have a wife. I was just angry. To add insult to injury, our little competition drew a crowd, and I looked up to see Melanie standing against the fence. To her credit, she flinched at some of Frank's comments, but she never looked in my direction. At one point, I sent a weak second serve into the net, and Frank directed it straight at Penny. The ball bounced off her shoulder and nearly knocked her off her feet. I ran towards the net with my racket raised, ready to confront him, but Penny grabbed my arm and begged me not to. "It was fair," she said. "I'm fine. I wasn't hurt. It's just part of the game." I looked at him with anger in my eyes while he pretended to tie his shoelaces. Finally, I returned to my position in angry disappointment. The final score was 6-2, 6-1, a humiliating defeat. Gritting my teeth, I walked up to the net to shake hands with my opponents. Frank's partner seemed embarrassed by his display and apologized to me while shaking my hand. Frank, however, simply walked up to us and, without bothering to extend his hand, said, "Everything was very fun. Let's do this again next time you feel like getting beaten up." Then he turned meaningfully, walked up to Melanie, and kissed her deeply through the waist-high fence. I don't know what Penny saw on my face, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me off the court. "He's trying to provoke you, Michael. He wants you to start a fight with him. Don't take it to heart, please, for my sake." I sat down on the podium, and someone handed me a cup of ice water. I took a few sips and then poured the rest over my head. I couldn't feel worse than I did that day. I apologized to Penny for playing so poorly, and although she objected, I got into the car and drove home. Throwing my clothes into the hamper, I dragged myself into the shower and let the water cascade off me for half an hour. When the water finally cooled, I climbed out, dried myself off, and flopped down on the bed, angry and irritated. I knew why I lost. I let Frank get to me. This knowledge only made me feel worse. He got to me, And he also got to Melanie, although obviously in a different way. However, the result was the same, turned an underdog like Frank into a big winner. I swore to myself that I was not going to take any more abuse from Frank or Melanie. I was going to find a way to take the initiative against both of them. Now all I had to do was figure out a way to achieve this. I lay down on the bed and thought about what my old tennis coach had told me: play on your opponent's weaknesses. It sounded good in theory, but how could I apply it in this situation? I knew from experience that when I start working on a problem, my brain continues to attack it, even when my mind wanders to other tasks. In fact, I have often found that if I don't think about a problem for a while, when I come back to it, the solution is in sight. This is what happened in this case. I pondered the task for a while and then put it aside to spend most of Sunday doing the yard work I had previously neglected. By that night, I was so tired that falling asleep was not a problem. When I got to work the next day, I realized I had a possible solution. It will probably be expensive, I thought to myself, but if it works, it will be worth it. Around mid-morning, I called one of our best salespeople. "Hey Jerry," I said, walking up to him, "is there a chance I can have lunch with you today?" "I'll treat you, of course. Michael, especially if you're the one doing the treating. We could meet at the bar and grill, which I know is a little seedy, but is great food." After we ordered, Jerry looked at me. "Hi Michael, I was so sorry to hear about you and Melanie. I thought everything was going swimmingly for you guys." "Yes, me too, Jerry, me too. But actually, that's why I wanted to talk to you." "Of course, Michael. I'll be happy to help in any way I can." "Okay, Jerry, here's my question. When you're entertaining your best clients, have you ever had to use an escort?" He looked at me strangely. "No, Michael, it's impossible. This is against company policy, and I would never do this." I leaned across the table towards him. "Jerry, this is not a company problem, and we are not here on business. This is strictly personal, if you know what I mean." He looked at me for a few seconds, then a light lit up in his eyes. "Oh, I understand," he said. "I think after being married for so long, you're out of the dating game for a while." He stopped and leaned towards me. "Of course, I know one of the best services in the city. But listen, Michael, they only serve the biggest clients. Their girls are incredible, but I think they may be way out of your price range." I smiled at him. "Let me worry about that. Just tell me how to contact them and what to expect." And he did just that. Over hamburgers and beer that day, I was nervous as I reviewed the notes I had taken during lunch. I hoped I was doing the right thing. Then I remembered Frank teasing me and Melanie's cold statement that she was leaving, and decided to go for it. I dialed the number Jerry gave me, and a pleasant male voice answered. "Hello, can I help you?" "Yes, I would like to speak with Mr. Henry Miller," I said as instructed. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice answered. "What are you looking for?" "Something from Grove Press," was my answer. "Please tell me your name, sir." I considered using a pseudonym, but Jerry was very clear about the need to clearly identify myself. "They're always worried about the police prostitution department," he told me. "They'll go to great lengths to make sure you're not a cop trying to set them up." I told him my real name. "Are you calling from the office?" asked Mr. Miller. "Yes," I answered, "but this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with my company." "I understand, sir. Now, could you give me the number of the switch you were working through?" "Of course," I said, "but wouldn't you prefer to use my direct line instead?" "No," he replied. "I'll call the main number and ask for you, and then we can take care of your case." Pretty smart, I thought to myself. If he calls and an operator answers, he will know that he is calling a real company. And if he transfers his call to me, then I am really an employee of the company. It's not completely foolproof, but it's damn good. I gave him the main switchboard number, and he immediately hung up. A couple of minutes later, my phone rang. The operator transferred the call to me. It was Mr. Miller. He then asked me for my mobile phone number. "This will allow us to contact you after hours if necessary," he explained. After I gave it to him, he continued, "Now that we have gone through the identification process," he said calmly, "please tell us how our service can help you." I am looking for a very special companion who may be available for a series of events that may stretch over a month or more, I said. Said the voice. That's a little unusual. As a rule, we do not make commitments for such a long period of time. We may be able to help you, but it will be expensive. He told me a price that made my eyes water. I swallowed. That's fine with me, Mr. Miller. Okay, do you have any special requirements? Yes, I said. She should look like a goddess. He grinned. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sir, but I think we can find a companion that suits your needs. He paused. Do you have a pen at hand? When I assured him that I did, he gave me their website address. I noticed that the URL started with HTTPS, which indicates a secure server. When I finished, to my surprise, he said, when prompted for username, you should enter NIN. He then gave me a digital password. Please understand, sir, that both your username and password will change immediately after you make your selection. This is done for both our safety and your own. When I confirmed my understanding, he continued, now, regarding the payment, sir. Once you have made your selection and the girl has been assigned to meet you, your credit card will be charged the amount you just agreed to. Additionally, our clients are expected to show their appreciation directly to their female companions. If you are satisfied with everything, we recommend a 25% tip. I did some quick math in my head. This better work, I thought, otherwise, I will go broke and remain humiliated. Very good, sir. When you are ready to make your choice, go to our website. You can do everything else there. Good afternoon, sir. After that, the line was cut off. I waited until I got home that evening to access the website Henry gave me. The main screen was labeled Capricorn Services with the slogan satisfying the needs of the most discerning customers. The username and password provided by Henry led me to the site, and a window opened that could have come straight from the pages of the Victoria's Secret catalog. All the women featured there were so gorgeous that I wondered why they weren't modeling instead of being escorts. In fact, I even wondered if the images might have been copied from some modeling agency site as part of some kind of bait and switch. But my friend Jerry insisted that Capricorn was real, so I decided to take a chance. I assumed I'd target a blonde, but a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair caught my eye, and I impulsively clicked. The confirmation message that appeared on my screen assured me that Rannon would contact me within 24 hours to arrange our meeting. I was then asked to enter my credit card details. After the card number and expiration date were verified, the screen went black and I was suddenly logged out of the site. Out of curiosity, I tried to return to the Capricorn site, but this time the welcome screen did not recognize the username and password. After the second attempt, I was redirected to my homepage. I was very impressed with the security their system provided and thought this was an encouraging sign. If they go to such great lengths, perhaps their service was as good as Jerry indicated. The next day, I sat on pins and needles and waited for Rannon's call. At some point, I even thought about backing out. The implementation of my little plan was expected to be very expensive, and there was no guarantee of success. But when I went into the break room to pour myself a cup of coffee, the two secretaries who were chatting there immediately fell silent upon my appearance and turned away from me. It didn't take a genius to figure out who they were talking about. The pain of being the subject of office gossip strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened, I wasn't going to continue being a helpless victim if I could do anything about it. Just after dinner, my mobile phone rang. When I answered, a melodious voice said, "Hello Michael, this is Rannon. I'm looking forward to meeting you." I swallowed and then responded by suggesting that we meet for dinner to discuss my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill Jerry and I had eaten at. It was small, dark, and far enough from Eden Point that I was unlikely to run into any of my neighbors. She laughed. "How interesting. I don't think I've ever had lunch here before. I'm looking forward to meeting you." With that, she hung up. Let's go, I thought. The grill wasn't very busy during the week, which was one of the reasons I chose it. The low lighting also suited my purposes. But when she walked through the door, it was like a spotlight illuminated her. She saw me, nervously stood up, came over, and confidently shook my hand. "Hello Michael," she said in a musical voice. It's nice to meet you in person. She sat down, and I followed suit. I must have stared at her because she laughed and said, "Well, what do I look like?" We've all seen movie stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They are great but not real. But now I have met one of them in person, and the impact has been stunning. The young woman sitting across from me was simply amazing. The dark eyes, the high cheekbones, the full lips, the way her hair framed her face, her athletic yet feminine figure. I could go on, but the fact was that for a few moments, all I could do was look at her in silent admiration. She smiled and broke the silence. "I take it to mean approval," she said. "Oh, yeah," I stammered. For a moment, I mean." My voice trailed off with embarrassment. Luckily, at that moment, the waitress came over to take our orders. I don't even remember what I ordered, but Rhiannon decided on a green salad with dressing. As the waitress wrote down her choices, I could tell that she too had fallen under Rhiannon's spell. She continued to glance at her until she finally burst out, "Aren't you an actress?" Rhiannon smiled sweetly at her. "No, I'm afraid not," she said, and the waitress walked away muttering to herself. Their little exchange allowed the rational part of my brain to come back online. I looked at Rhiannon curiously. "I bet this happens to you often." She nodded unconsciously. "Yes, this happens quite often. May I ask you a question? Why don't you act on television or work in the modeling business? And, well, you know." I asked, stuttering slightly at the end. "I considered it," she admitted, "but it's a very cruel world. I may look good to you, but I'm just one of many in this world. The chances of making it there are about the same as a basketball player getting into the NBA. But in my field, I stand out. And unlike a model or actress, I didn't have to go hungry for years, paying my dues. I made a lot of money from the very beginning. By the time my appearance begins to deteriorate, I will have saved enough to live off my investments for the rest of my life. And if I'm really lucky, I'll find a rich man who wants a trophy wife and won't care what she used to do for a living." I couldn't help but nod. I didn't agree with her chosen career path, but she definitely approached it wisely. At this moment, the waitress brought our order. Having served Rhiannon, she looked at her again and said, "Are you sure you're not on TV?" "I'm just sure I've seen you before." Rhiannon shook her head. "I don't think so. If I had been there, I'm sure I would have remembered it." I tried to suppress my laughter as the waitress hurried away. When we started eating, she looked at me carefully. "So, Michael, why don't you give me an idea of what you mean? Henry said this was something unusual." I blushed and started telling her my story. When I replayed my conversation with Melanie after I caught her in bed with Frank, Rhiannon looked at me with sympathy. "That was pretty insensitive," she said. And when I described Frank Calhoun and his behavior, she nodded understandingly. "I've met a lot of men of his type." She wiped her mouth gracefully and then folded her hands on the table. "So, what exactly do you want to do, and how do I fit into your plan?" I spent the next 15 minutes describing what I hoped to achieve over the next month or so. When I finished, I admitted that I had serious doubts about what I was trying to do. But I just can't sit back and resist and fold my arms and let both of them ignore me. And now that I've met you, I'm starting to think this might work. She smiled widely. "What a wonderful compliment," she said. She then leaned forward across the table. "You know, I think I'll like it," she said enthusiastically, and extended my hand to shake hers to seal the deal. She laughed and shook it tightly. "Accomplice," she said with a sly smile. Then she sat down and did something to her body that I didn't quite catch, and suddenly started oozing raw intimate. I felt excited. "Well," she said in a low, cute voice, "now that we have completed the business portion of our meeting, can we take it somewhere more comfortable to relax?" My mouth suddenly went dry, and I had to take a sip of water before I could speak. "No," I said, "tonight should just be business." She gave me a wry smile. "You don't find me attractive?" "Oh, hell no," I muttered. "I mean, yes. I mean, it's not like that. I'm just trying to focus on what we're planning to do, and it would be better for me not to get involved with you like this. Don't you understand? But I have a bonus for you." With these words, I handed her an envelope across the table. I put several large bills there in advance. She accepted it solemnly, and it disappeared into her purse. Then she changed her position again, and her intimate aura seemed to recede. I think maybe I understand, Michael. She tilted her head slightly to look at me. You're a very interesting man. I think I'll enjoy our little adventure together. With these words, she got up and left, and I remained sitting in the office. For some reason, I felt squeezed like a lemon. What a woman, I thought. We planned for stage 1 of Operation Honey Trap to begin on Saturday shortly after lunchtime. Temperatures were already rising in Atlanta, and I thought there would be a large crowd at the pool at Eden Point. I was a little worried if Renaa would show up, but shortly after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled into my driveway. She came to my door with a small bag, and when I raised my eyebrows, she said, "My swimsuit." She looked around and smiled. "So, this is the suburb. Do you like it here?" I frowned. "Until recently, yes." She patted my cheek. "We'll fix everything." We split up at the club to go to the locker rooms and change into our swimsuits, as we agreed. I went out first and found 2 sun loungers near a table with an umbrella. Before I could get comfortable, I noticed Big Frank Calhoun approaching me. "Well, Michael," he boomed, "I'm surprised to see you at the pool today. I thought you'd learn a lesson after trying to improve your tennis game." I knew he was trying to provoke me, but I answered evenly, "No, today my girlfriend and I want to enjoy the pool and some Sunday." But Frank wasn't going to let me off that easily. "Oh, you already have a girlfriend? I'd like to meet her." By now, our conversation had attracted the attention of people nearby. "Well, you're in luck, Frank." "Here she is," I said, pointing to the door of the women's locker room. My God, when Renaa approached us, there was silence among the club members. I expected her to be in a bikini, but to my surprise, she was wearing a one-piece swimsuit. Somehow, it was much more attractive. It was made of a silvery material that caught and reflected sunlight, attracting the attention of every man and woman in sight. I heard clicks and realized she was wearing stilettos. They made her calves, thighs, and butt look amazing. As she approached us, I looked from her legs to her suit. It somehow looked different, and then I realized it must be made of the thinnest material I had ever seen. It completely followed every contour of her body, and when I looked closer, it became obvious that the suit was completely unlined. It looked like it was just painted on her body. She came up to me, took my hand, pressed her chest against my bicep, and kissed my cheek. "Oh, it's so nice, honey," she said. "You took a seat for us." Then she turned to Frank. "Is this your friend, Michael?" I looked at Frank and saw, to my delight, that his mouth was open as he looked at the vision before him. "Renaa," I said, "I want you to meet Frank." Frank closed his mouth and quickly extended his hand to shake hers. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said rather grandly. "If I can help with anything, please don't hesitate to ask." Renaa smiled sweetly. "Oh, how sweet." She turned to me and shyly asked, "Is everyone here as good as Frank?" I dryly answered, "No, Frank is unique." She smiled at him again. "Well, thank you very much for making me feel at home." When he remained standing, she looked down with a smile. "Now you can let go of my hand," he said embarrassedly. "Well, I have to go." "I hope I see you again, Rhiannon. I hope I see you again." With these words, he awkwardly turned away and returned to the other side of the pool, repeatedly looking over his shoulder along the way. I looked in that direction and saw Melanie sitting with her arms crossed. She didn't look happy. Rhiannon and I settled back into our sun loungers. She took my hand and pulled me closer to whisper in my ear, "I think everything went well." I squeezed her hand. "You were perfect," I assured her. She smiled and quickly kissed me on the lips. I knew she meant it as a friendly kiss, but 15 minutes later, I could still feel her lips on mine. She then stretched out face down on the lounge chair. "Would you like to put some suntan lotion on me, Michael?" When I happily complied, I was sure I heard men make a sound nearby. Over the next few hours, it seemed like everyone who was at the pool that day decided to walk past us to see my new girlfriend. I know for sure that everyone from my men's team passed by, and after exchanging a few cheerful words, I decided to introduce them to Rhiannon. She was kind to everyone, chatting easily as if they were her old friends. At some point, I leaned over and whispered in her ear, "You should have gone into politics." She just smiled and winked at me. "I'm just one step away from that job," I burst out laughing. When everything calmed down, she leaned towards me again. "Who is she?" I knew exactly who she meant and pointed her to Melanie on the other side of the pool. "Okay," she said. "Leave it to me." She put on her high heels and walked towards Melanie's side of the pool. Bent at the waist and facing the pool, she took off her shoes and then gracefully dove into the shallow water. As she surfaced, she tilted her head forward and then quickly threw it back so that her hair formed a graceful arc above her head, fanning water into the air. I was delighted. I had seen this move in commercials before, but never in real life. It was amazing. Then, in one motion, Rhiannon gracefully climbed out of the water onto the deck. As she stood facing Melanie, water flowing down her body, she reached up to push her hair back, highlighting her breasts. Then she put her shoes back on, adding about 10 centimeters to her height, and returned to where I was watching. Reluctantly looking away from Rhiannon, I looked at Melanie. She looked at me angrily, then turned and spoke sharply to Frank before grabbing her things and heading towards the exit. He followed her, looking over his shoulder again at Rhiannon. She gracefully settled into a chair with her eyes closed. I could only hear her muttering, "Mission complete." While we were there, one unpleasant event happened. As we were about to leave, I looked up and saw Penny walking in my direction. Oh crap, I thought. I completely forgot about the Penny girls team playing today. What will I tell her? "Hello, Michael. I'm so glad to see you again. Maybe we can get together and play some more." She stopped abruptly as Rhiannon stood up and grabbed my hand. "Oh," Penny said in surprise. "Who is this?" This is Rhiannon, my girlfriend," I said awkwardly. Penny blinked and looked at Rhiannon silently for a moment. Then she extended her hand. "I'm Penny," she said. "Nice to meet you." She turned to me. I need to get myself in order. I'm pretty dirty after our match today. See you, Michael." Then she turned and hurried away before I could think of anything to say. "Who was that?" Rhiannon asked curiously. "It was Penny Pennington," I told her. "She is my partner in mixed doubles." "Interesting," was her answer. I mentally kicked myself for not planning ahead on what to do with Penny. I didn't want to risk revealing my plan to her, but I also didn't want Penny to get the wrong idea. Crap. Soon after, Rhiannon and I decided to call it a day. I felt like we had done everything we wanted today. I swear, when we left the pool, the level of conversation increased significantly. When we got back to my house, I let Rhiannon take a shower while I dried myself off and thought about the day. With the exception of my unexpected meeting with Penny, everything went even better than I could have hoped. I showed Melanie that I was not going to spend the rest of my life quietly mourning her desertion. Moreover, I showed her that not only was she replaceable, but I had actually improved my situation quite a lot. Let her suffer a little, I thought triumphantly. "So, how do you think it went?" I heard a voice behind me. I turned to see Rhiannon wrapped in a bath towel. "You were perfect," I answered enthusiastically. "You were everything I hoped for and more." She did something with her fingers, and suddenly the towel slipped off her legs. "Don't you want to celebrate?" she asked shyly. I stood there for a while, unable to breathe. Everything about her was absolutely perfect. Her breasts were proudly raised, small but perfectly proportional to her body. There wasn't an ounce of fat on her. Instead, her abdominal muscles were well developed and inevitably drew my gaze to her Venus mound, which was smooth and completely without anything. From there, her legs stretched out seemingly into infinity, strong and perfectly formed. I gasped and realized that I had not been breathing. Gathering my strength, I walked up to her, bent down, and handed her the towel which she dropped. "I'm so sorry, Rhiannon. It's just not the time," I said. "Sure, okay." I was just checking. She threw a towel over her shoulders and walked away from me. Oh my God, I've never seen her but before. When she returned, she was dressed and her bag was packed. I handed her a sealed envelope. "Thank you," I said warmly. Today was exactly what I wanted. She tilted her head again in that funny way and looked at me. Do you want to go back to Melanie? She suddenly asked. I shuddered. No, I said furiously. This was not a one-time bad decision or loss of control. She deliberately threw me away like some kind of trash that she no longer needed. I will never go back to her under any circumstances. That's what I thought, she said, but I was just wondering, anyway, are we still meeting next week? Oh, of course, I said with a big smile. During the week, I decided to go to the club for tennis training. I wanted everyone to know that I was tired of hiding. I'm glad you came back and stopped being discouraged, the captain of our men's team told me. My team members greeted me with backslaps and wide winks. Behind me, I heard someone say, "Lucky son of A." I smiled, knowing what impression Rhiannon could make. A couple of days later, I returned to the mixed doubles practice courts, but Penny was nowhere to be found. Our captain told me that she had called and said she was sick. When I returned home after training, I immediately called her back. Are you okay, Penny? I asked. It doesn't sound like you're sick. Oh, nothing serious. Probably just a minor bug, she said sharply. Should I bring you something? I asked eagerly. No, she replied. Thanks, but I don't really need anything. Anyway, it's better if you stay away. I don't want you to get infected by me. Okay, I said hesitantly. But if you get worse, call me right away. I'm worried about you. She made a vague promise and then said she needed to rest, so I hung up. I didn't like it. Penny was always so healthy and cheerful that I worried something was seriously wrong with her. And our little run-in by the pool last Saturday probably didn't help anything, I thought. I still felt like I couldn't tell her about my honey trap for fear of messing it up, but I just didn't want Penny to get the wrong impression. I hope when this is all over, she'll forgive me, I thought. The next step in my plan was scheduled for the weekend. There was a shared dinner at the club, and Rhiannon and I were going to be there. When she arrived at my house, she was dressed completely differently than last time. Wow, you look like you just stepped out of the pages of a fashion magazine, I said, looking at her. She was wearing casual clothes consisting of a skirt, a casual jacket, and a blouse, but while it sounded conventional, the fabrics, styling, and accessories all screamed high fashion. She curtsied like a little girl. Thank you, dear sir. Actually, I just picked this up at Nordstrom, she said. But don't worry if the labels don't mean anything to you. Today, my main target is the ladies, and one lady in particular. Well, I can't speak for wives, but I think you'll still have a significant influence on their husbands, I told her sincerely. As we pulled into the parking lot in front of the clubhouse, Rhiannon turned to me and said, Tonight, we need to change our tactics slightly. We should split up and talk to people. This will allow me to do what I need to do. Sounds good, I told her. When we walked out onto the patio where dinner was taking place, I immediately realized that we were both right once again. Most of the men simply stared openly at Rhiannon as she passed by. The wives were a little more discreet, but I heard more than one comment about Rhiannon's outfit that evening. Some of the braver women asked her where she bought her clothes, and soon Rhiannon was happily trading shopping tips with them. After talking a bit, she and I got back together to eat. Successful? I asked her quietly. Oh, I've been very busy, she said seriously. I've learned so much about what wives think about the situation with you, Melanie, and Frank. More importantly, I'm making your ex's life miserable. I also flirted quite a bit with her fiancé, and she didn't like it at all. I just grinned. It was obvious that Rhiannon knew exactly which buttons to push. I was chatting with one of my teammates when Melanie walked by and beckoned me over. Out of curiosity, I followed her to find out what she wanted. When she turned to face me, I saw that her face was red with anger. Well, it looks like you didn't waste any time getting back into the dating scene, she said irritably. I didn't know there was a mandatory waiting period, I said sarcastically. Yes, it seems to me that you're completely out of your league, Michael. Where the hell did you find her? I never met her when we were married. I met her through work, I said kindly. Well, if I were you, I'd be more careful. She seems like more than you can handle." I couldn't resist. "That's where you're wrong, Melanie. I serve her at every opportunity." "Is that so?" she said sharply. "In that case, you better keep her away from Frank." With those words, she rushed away. I smiled to myself. Everything was going exactly as I had hoped. At that moment, I noticed Penny carrying a tray of food. I knew she was on the entertainment committee, but I didn't know if she was well enough to come tonight. I ran up and grabbed her hand. She blushed when she saw me. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I told her. "You should have called me and told me you were well enough to come tonight." "I guess I wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I figured you'd be here with your new girlfriend and didn't want to bother you." At that moment, Rhiannon walked by, talking to one of my teammates, confirming Penny's assumption. She frowned. She was about to move on, but I grabbed her hand again. "Wait, Penny, we need to talk about our next match," I said. She hesitated and then apparently made a decision. "Michael, things have been really tight for me lately, and well, I've decided to give up mixed doubles and focus on the women's team." I was shocked. "You can't do this, Penny," I blurted out. "You're my partner. Who will I find to play?" Penny looked over my shoulder, and when I looked back, I saw Rhiannon standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said. "Now please let me go. I need to deliver this food." When I let go of her hand, she rushed away. Rhiannon took my hand and walked with me to an empty table. When we sat down, she leaned over and whispered, "Just so you know, this girl loves you." "What?" "No, that's crazy. She's my tennis partner," I said. "She took a Pilates class with Melanie, and if I'm not mistaken," Rhiannon continued, ignoring me, "you're a little in love with her too." "No," I objected. "It's not true. She's just a good friend, maybe." She said skeptically, "Anyway, I think we've done all we can for this evening, so let's get out of here." Back at my house, I asked Rhiannon about what happened with Melanie and Frank. She smiled smugly. I went to where they had placed the food and tasted it, complimenting Melanie. She clearly didn't appreciate my presence, but she couldn't say anything. Then I told her how much I liked her outfit, and she was forced to return the compliment. I saw that she recognized the clothes and realized how much they must have cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were almost green with envy. "That sounds like Melanie," I said, shaking my head. Definitely fashion-conscious and proud of her dress sense. It was at this point, Rhiannon continued, that one of the ladies asked Melanie to help in the kitchen. Although she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. As she said this, Rhiannon was reenacting what she was doing. She bent over at the waist, and her blouse fell down, revealing her ample breasts barely contained by her thin bra. Then she made a small movement with her finger, put it in her mouth, and looked at me, sucking on it so sweetly that I felt a rush of heat. She straightened up and smiled at me, clearly aware of the impact she was having. As soon as I caught Frank's attention, I started flirting with him seriously. I asked him if he played football, which gave him a chance to show off a little. While he was doing this, I reached out my hand and stroked his chest. I commented on how much bigger he was than you and said I like big men. She grinned. "Wow," I said. No wonder Melanie was so hostile. "I'm doing the best I can," she said with obvious false modesty. "I can't believe Frank actually believed you were hitting on him," I added. She laughed loudly. Guys like Frank are so self-confident that it would never occur to them to doubt a woman's interest in them. The ironic thing is that they are usually the worst lovers. I had to smile at that. If what Rhiannon said was true, it would serve Melanie well. I handed her the envelope. "Do you think we're ready for the next stage?" I asked her. "Definitely. Dancing at your club will be perfect for what we have planned." Then she turned and headed towards the front door. "What, no attempt at seduction tonight?" I asked her with a smile. She smiled at me over her shoulder. "I didn't think so." Then she turned and gave a slight jerk of her hips, which sent a jolt through me. After she left, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what was going on. On one hand, I was very pleased with how well the honey trap worked. Even though Melanie didn't want me anymore, I knew she was less than happy with how quickly I found someone to replace her, and even more upset that her replacement was much hotter than she was. It was all really gratifying, but I couldn't help but feel sad about Penny's situation. Could Rhiannon be right? Was I interested? Could I really have feelings for Penny? I liked her from the first time Melanie introduced us. Plus, I found her attractive, slim, athletic, and graceful with a charming and friendly personality. But because of Melanie, I always tried to keep our relationship strictly friendly within the framework of the tennis partnership, and I was sure that Penny wanted the same thing, especially when she was dealing with the loss of her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon said about Penny. This couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me like the plague? And why did this bother me so much? For that matter, why did I repeatedly turn down the prettiest woman I've probably ever met in my life? Could my feelings for Penny be a part of this? Finally, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I did, I still didn't know what to do with them. I decided that the best thing for me to do was to continue moving forward while focusing on the plan I had initiated. The club's annual spring dance was a popular event that always drew large crowds. Ladies used dancing as an excuse to wear new clothes, and men were reluctant to put on their sports jackets, some even wore ties. I was counting on Frank and Melanie showing up. I told Rhiannon what to expect, and I was curious to see what she would wear for the culmination of our plan tonight, so I was surprised and disappointed to see her get out of the car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Admittedly, these were the tightest jeans I'd ever seen on a woman, and the t-shirt hugged her breasts obscenely without a bra, but still, I expected something different. My face must have given me away because she stroked it as she brushed past. You didn't think that I would risk wrinkling my dress on the road, did you? Just let me use your bedroom for a while, and then I'll be ready to go. I had already put on my sports jacket and trousers, so I hung around the office impatiently while she got dressed. Damn, I chuckled to myself, we're almost like an old married couple. A few minutes later, I heard her voice, Michael, can you come over? I need your help. I returned and opened the door to the bedroom. Oh my God. There stood Rhiannon in the prettiest lingerie I've ever seen. Her strapless bra and panties were the same chocolate brown color with a creamy lace trim that drew attention to the curve of her breasts and the sensual cleavage between her legs. Her stockings were the same dark brown color and were held up by a garter belt that drew even more attention to her most private parts. She took half a step in her stilettos and turned around to reveal that her panties were actually a thong, revealing her firm buttocks. She turned to face me. Will it work? She asked with a slight smile. I couldn't help myself. I took a step towards her, but she stopped me with a smile and a raised hand. No, not now. I can't let you ruin everything. So, now that I see your approval, get out of here and let me put on a dress. I think I staggered back to my lair. A few minutes later, she came out, this time wearing a strapless dress that was the same cream color as the trim of her underwear. The color matched her hair perfectly. As she walked across the floor, I realized that the dress must have been custom-made because the fabric seemed to flow down her limbs like water. With every step, I could clearly see the outline of her hips, and when she turned, her buttocks flexed. Clearly, the slit in the side of the dress reached just below the top of her stocking, and when she stood just right, her perfect leg was exposed to devastating effect. And it didn't help my blood pressure at all that I knew exactly what she was wearing under her dress. I swallowed hard. I think you're going to cause heart attacks today, I told her, not joking. She smiled silently at me and extended her hand so that I could walk her to the door for dancing. The club cleared out the patio and hung paper lanterns. It was a little silly, but I found myself enjoying the effect of the soft lights and loud music. Rhiannon slipped into my arms to dance, and I was not surprised to find that she was a much better dancer than I was. As we moved together, she laid her head on my shoulder, and at that moment, I decided that I didn't care that she was at work. I just enjoyed the feeling of her body against mine and the pleasure of her company. She raised her head and pulled back far enough to look at me. You know, life in this country isn't so bad. A girl could get used to it. Before I could answer, she tensed up. Oh, stay in your places. I turned just in time to see Frank Calhoun heading our way, dragging a visibly struggling Melanie behind him. "Hello, Rhiannon," he boomed. "Hi, Michael. I'm so glad you decided to join us tonight. How about switching partners for a dance or two?" When I agreed, he pulled Rhiannon away from me, leaving a clearly uncomfortable Melanie standing next to me. I extended my hand to her. "Would you like to dance for old time's sake?" She reluctantly agreed, and when the new song started playing, I started dancing with her. It was an interesting experience. I loved this woman and was married to her for 10 years. However, after what happened, all I had left was a strong desire to make her feel what she did to me. "So, was our marriage really that bad?" I asked. She sighed. "No, Michael, that's not true at all. We had good years and glory times, but then everything fell into a routine, and after a while, I just didn't feel particularly excited about our relationship anymore. When Frank showed up and made it so obvious to me how much he wanted me, I just got caught up in the whole thing. I've really fallen hard for him, Michael. I fell in love just like I did back in college." She looked at me. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. You understand?" "I understand," I said bitterly. "You decided to change your shoes on the go." "That's not what I meant," she said defensively. "It's okay," I said. "I did the same thing." She winced, remembering who I was now dating, and I felt some satisfaction. If everything is done correctly later, it will only be better. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon walking towards us hand in hand. "There's your girl, Michael," Frank said with a slight grin. "Good night." Then he walked away, and Melanie ran after him. Rhiannon and I resumed dancing. "How did everything go?" I whispered in her ear. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. "The hook is secure," she said. "He's convinced that I'm in love with him. He's going to apologize to Melanie, and we'll meet at the club after everyone leaves. I'm just a little nervous about this part. The timing has to be perfect," I told her. "Just leave it to me, women know everything about such things," she said, then licked my ear, and I shuddered. As the evening ended, I noticed the crowd began to thin out quite quickly. I think I must have been looking around because Rhiannon noticed it. "Sorry, Michael," she said, "but I don't think Penny came this evening." "Am I that transparent?" I asked. "Like glass," she answered with a slight smile. When we got back to my house, I reached into my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. "I may not be able to give it to you later," I said, "and I want to make sure you're okay." She accepted it almost reluctantly. I noticed she looked at me for a moment, and then her face changed. "This was the most unusual assignment I have ever had," she said, "and you are unlike any client I have ever had." It was a little frustrating at times. I blushed. But I really enjoyed it all. I took both her hands in mine. Intent on revenge, I knew I needed someone with admirable qualities, I replied, "but I never expected to find someone like you, and I will never forget you." I suddenly stepped forward and kissed her on the lips. She held the kiss for a few seconds and then pulled back abruptly. She blinked quickly several times and hurriedly said, "Don't smudge my lipstick." Then she looked at the jewel-encrusted watch on her wrist and added, "It's almost time. We have to go. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With these words, she walked out the door, got into the car, and drove away. I stood there for a minute and then made a decision. Rhiannon and I didn't talk about it, and I was hoping I wouldn't completely screw it up, but I had to take that risk. I pulled out my cell phone. She must have gotten my number. "Michael, why are you calling at this hour?" Penny answered. "I'm going to ask you for the biggest favor of my life. Please, please don't ask any questions. Just let's meet at the club in 30 minutes. What's going on, Michael? What does all of this mean? Please, Penny," I begged. "I don't have time to explain. Please believe me. Just come back in 30 minutes. Sorry, I have to go." She hung up. As I walked towards the clubhouse, I wondered if she would come. The chance was slim, but I decided it was the only one I had. When I got to the parking lot, there were 2 cars parked there. I pulled out my cell phone again and made another call. "Frank," Melanie's angry voice came over the phone. Where are you? It's not Frank, I said. It's Michael. Michael, what do you need, and why are you calling so late? She demanded. I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon. What? She screamed. Where are they? Listen, I said, just find me at the club as soon as possible. Then I hung up. Frank's house was a few blocks from the clubhouse, but Melanie must have been running because I soon spotted her cutting through someone's backyard. I intercepted her before she reached the club. Where is he? She raged. Quiet, I commanded, grabbing her wrist. You have to be quiet so we can catch them. I led her to the door of the club, which was unlocked, and we tiptoed across the threshold. Entering the living room, we heard rustling and murmuring of clothes in the dim light coming through the windows. I saw Melanie's eyes widen. I quickly put my hand over her mouth to keep her from making noise and then pointed to the switch on the wall. She nodded understandingly, and we tiptoed towards them. I flicked the switch, and the room was instantly filled with light. Frank tried to jump up with a frightened cry, but getting tangled in his pants pulled down to his knees, he tripped and fell to the floor. He jumped to his feet again, desperately pulling up his pants behind him. Rhiannon jumped up from where she had been lying on the sofa. Her dress was draped over the back of the sofa, and as she stood up, she pulled her bra over her bare breasts. She stood there dressed only in her outrageous underwear, and no one could be in any doubt about what was happening. I had to hold Melanie back while she screamed at Frank. How could you do this to me? We were supposed to get married. Rhiannon clung to Frank's arm, cowering behind him in the face of Melanie's wrath. Now that he had pants on, Frank's confidence returned. He looked at me boldly and then turned to Rhiannon and asked, "What do you want now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she answered in a voice of a little girl, "I just want to be with you." As she clung tightly to him, he hugged her protectively. Then he turned to face us. Despite Melanie's distress, his first words were addressed to me. "Well, Michael, it looks like you've lost your second woman too." I didn't say a word, but Melanie screamed, "What about us, Frank? What about us?" The big man turned to her. "Look, Melanie, we were fine for a while, but it would never have lasted very long. Now, I found someone better, and I'm going to devote all my time to her." He looked back at Rhiannon and then turned to Melanie. "You can't blame a guy for wanting to change his shoes, can you?" Hearing those words, even in her pain and anger, Melanie couldn't help but look at me guiltily. Rhiannon turned and deftly put on her dress. She then turned and put her arms around Frank's neck. He leaned over and kissed her. "Come on, baby, let's get out of here," he said, pulling her towards the door. "Go ahead, Frank," she said. "I need to tell Michael something. Besides, I don't want to leave my car here. Listen, come on, I'll meet you at this bar." She reached into her purse, pulled out a piece of paper, and hastily wrote down the address. "I'll be right behind you, honey," she added, stroking the front of his pants and kissing him passionately. He looked at her doubtfully. "Are you sure everything will be okay?" he asked. "I'm sure, dear. Michael won't hurt me. He's not that kind of guy." "Yeah," Frank grinned. "I think you're right." With these words, he headed towards the door, and we heard him leave. While our attention was focused on Frank, Melanie managed to escape from my arms. She screamed and rushed at Rhiannon with outstretched claws. Instead of flinching, Rhiannon stood calmly in her place as Melanie rushed up to her. Rhiannon quickly stepped to the side, grabbed Melanie's outstretched hand, and smoothly twisted it behind her back. She winked at me. I knew those self-defense lessons would come in handy, I thought, as Melanie continued to resist. Rhiannon said sharply to her, "If you don't calm down, I'll be forced to dislocate your shoulder." Melanie stopped resisting, and Rhiannon pushed her away, turning her to face her. "Listen, Melanie, there's something you should know," she said. "I don't care about your Neanderthal ex-fiancé, and I have absolutely no intention of joining him at the bar he's heading to." Melanie was stunned. "But why? Why did you seduce him?" "Because this is my profession. I'm a paid escort. I've been with dozens of guys like Frank. They all think they're God's gift to women and are always looking for the next piece of fifth place. Do you think he loved you?" The only thing he really loved was the opportunity to finally beat Michael at something. I believe he liked you, but he liked beating Michael even more. So, Michael hired me to make Frank pay up and at the same time show you how it feels to be cheated on. It hurts, doesn't it? After that, Melanie screamed and then rushed at me. But before I could react, a figure flashed in front of me and knocked her down. She sprawled awkwardly on the floor as Penny stood over her, fists clenched. You deserve it, Melanie, after what you did to Michael. You deserve so much better. Melanie lay silently and sobbed. It seemed to me that her feelings were more wounded than her body. Penny turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. Is that really true? She asked me. She's really not your girlfriend? No, I told her solemnly. She was my partner in the honey trap we set for Frank and Melanie, but nothing more. But she's so beautiful, Penny objected. I could never compete with someone like her. Rhiannon walked over and put her hands on Penny's shoulders. Stupid girl, I never had a chance. He only looked at you. Penny looked at me again. You mean, you never even? Rhiannon interceded again. No, Penny, he never did. There was no way I could get him away from you long enough for him to touch me. And believe me, I gave him the opportunity. Penny didn't say anything but looked at me with shining eyes. Rhiannon grinned at both of us. I think it's time for me to get out of here. I've had more difficult tasks than this, but for some reason, it tired me. At that moment, Melanie rose from the floor. What about me? Where should I go? I can't go back to Frank's house, not after what happened. Penny looked at her thoughtfully. I don't know what you'll do tomorrow, but you can sleep at my house tonight. I'll go with Michael. With these words, she kissed me deeply. I took her hand and decided never to let go. But something was bothering me, and I turned back to Rhiannon. What about Frank? Where did you even send him? She laughed. This is the address of a gay bar that I know. I wonder how long you will sit there before he realizes that I won't come. Then the smile on her face faded, and she looked at me intently. Good luck, Michael. You are a special man, and I will not forget you. She leaned towards me and kissed me tenderly. I felt Penny squeeze my hand even tighter. Rhiannon then turned to Penny, and her face took on a hard expression. Treat him right, got it? If I ever hear that you didn't, I'll come back, and this time, I won't take no for an answer. The fierce expression left her face, replaced by a look that I later realized was sadness. She reached out and patted my cheek. But I don't think I'll be so lucky. She then reached into her purse and pressed something into my hand. Goodbye, she said, and then turned and walked out the door, swaying her hips beautifully. I looked at my hand. It contained 4 unopened envelopes. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the wife has made the most terrible deed. I would not have been able to endure it if I were her husband, and he actually did not have to endure it because of the divorce, especially he found a girl worthy of him. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. Until new videos.